Chapter 9 of A Lucky Penny by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 9, in which Tom Garland performs an heroic act. "Where are we going?" asked Tom's companion, and he limped manfully alongside his friend and chum. "Going?" replied Tom. "I don't know. I really haven't thought about the matter, to tell you the truth, Dick." Dick smiled in his patient way, and looked up into Garland's face as much as to say he was quite contented to go anywhere his friend went. All he asked was to be with him. "I had enough on my mind to engineer our escape, so I didn't bother with thinking about what was going to happen to us after we got away, if we were so fortunate," continued Tom. "But don't worry, Dick. We'll manage somehow." "I'm not worrying," answered the lame boy. "I'm only too happy to be away from that place. It would have killed me had I been forced to remain there a little while longer." Fearing pursuit and possible recapture if they kept to the public streets, dark and silent even as they were, Tom made a detour which brought him to the tracks of the Boston, Revere Beach, and Lynn Railroad. After a short tramp along the ties, Garland, in consideration of his companion's infirmity, proposed a rest for a while. A little deserted hut not far from the track offered them shelter from the night wind, which swept in from the bay. It was a gloomy spot, and the mournful dirge of the waters not far away saluted their ears with a ceaseless cadence. Before they were ready to continue on their way, the rain began to fall with a steady persistence which argued against any let-up much before morning. "I'm afraid we'll have to stay here some time, Dick," said Tom after he had looked outside and had sized up the state of the weather. "Well," replied the lame boy in a tone of resignation, "what's the difference? We are bound for nowhere. Practically, we're bound for Boston proper, that is, if we can raise the price to compensate the ferry company for taking us across the river," said Tom with a grin which was lost in the darkness. "And when we get there, what then?" "I give it up, Dick. Ask me something easier." "Then I'll ask you now what you meant by your remark on the roof of the industrial farm building, that if I only knew what I had just escaped, I would be willing to take a greater risk to escape than the peril that we were facing at the moment." "I almost hate to tell you, Dick," replied Tom gravely. "It's bound to jar your ideas of human nature." "In what way?" asked the lame boy with some curiosity. "What I'm about to tell you seems really incredible. If I hadn't overheard the scheme and actually caught the villain in the very act myself, I think I would have some doubts myself of the story if repeated from the lips of another party. But I'm sorry to say, Dick, I have it on the best evidence in the world that your stepfather, Dr. Hawk, is a heartless scoundrel." "Tom!" gasped the lame boy, clutching his companion's arm. "Let me tell you all I know, and then you can draw your own conclusions." Whereupon Tom told him what had occurred that evening in reference to the doctor's attempt on Dick's life. The boy listened with open mouth and dilated eyes, and when Tom had concluded he broke out into a hysterical fit of weeping. The recital from the lips of a friend he couldn't doubt had been a terrible shock to him. "How could he wish to do such a crime? How could he?" moaned the boy. "There are men in this world so morally depraved that they will do anything for money," said Tom, and as he spoke he couldn't help thinking that his own uncle was a bird of the same feather. "But Dr. Hawk handles my money now," said Dick plaintively. "In what shape is your property?" asked Tom. "Mostly in registered United States bonds. Then your stepfather can only get a hold of the interest semi-annually. What he wants evidently are the bonds themselves. In the case of your death, who's to get them?" "My mother." "And your mother is dead?" "Yes," replied Dick sadly. "Well, I don't know how such things might be managed, but I am sure Dr. Hawk had his plans laid so that he expects to corral your money if you should happen to die. If such a thing wasn't possible, he would have no object in putting you out of the way." "It's a terrible thing to think of." "Don't say a word. Let me tell you about my respected relative, Uncle Sleek, with whom I lived ever since my own mother died 2 years ago, until he got it into his head to send me to the farm." Tom then proceeded to tell Dick what he had overheard in the parlor of the industrial farm on the afternoon he took Fanny Wicks to the matinee. "Now what do you think of that? The only difference between you and I is that the object is apparent in your case, while in mine I can only surmise that something has cropped up of late in my favor which my relative proposes to corner for his own especial benefit. However, it's bound to come out in time, I dare say, And when I do learn something about it, I won't do a thing with Mr. Aminadab's sleek, bet your life. Isn't it funny that we two should happen to come together?" said Dick. "Stranger things than that happen every day in this world," answered Tom. "Now that we're both cast out on the world, I'm afraid I shall be a drag on you," said the lame boy sorrowfully. "I would rather die than hurt your prospects, Tom," he added earnestly, though his pale lips quivered and his thin hands trembled as he pictured a possible parting between himself and the chum of his heart. "Dick, you almost make me laugh," replied Garland cheerfully. "We've sworn to be friends and chums till death, haven't we? Well, that goes. I'm strong enough to look out for you until you get something to do that will not overtax your strength. We've only got a few pennies between us, it is true, but where there's a will to get more, there's always a way to reach them. That's my slogan, old chap, and don't you overlook it for one moment." "Oh, Tom," cried the lame boy gratefully, "I don't think there's another boy like you in this world." "Don't you? How silly you talk. There's oceans of them, chum. Every real true American boy will stand by a comrade to the limit." "Hark, how it rains," murmured Dick after a short pause. "I'm glad of it." "Glad of it?" said Dick in some astonishment. "Sure, it will clear up all the sooner. If there's one thing I hate, it's a continuous performance drizzle. I like to hear it pelt away as it does on the roof of this shanty now. It'll get tired by and clear off. I'll bet it'll be a fine day tomorrow." "I hope it will." "You can gamble on it, chum. Now, I'll tell you what we'll do. Just finish out your night's sleep right here. No one will interrupt us, and we'll need to be halfway fresh in the morning, for we probably will have something of a tramp before we round up anything worth our while." There was some straw in the hut, so the boys made themselves as comfortable as circumstances permitted, and within 15 minutes nature asserted itself and they slept the sleep of the weary. The morning sun, glistening across the now placid waters of Boston Bay, shone into the hovel at 6 o'clock on the next morning, and, falling on the faces of the two boys, awoke them to the realization that a new day was before them. They got up, stretched themselves, and brushed the wisps of straw from their clothes. "Well, Dick, how do you feel after a roughhouse night?" asked Tom cheerily. "I'm not complaining," replied the lame boy. "Glad to hear it. Now let's count our capital and see what we can afford for breakfast, for I'm bound to say I feel as if a square meal would sit nicely on my stomach." Dick handed over the few coins he had managed to save during his stay at the farm, and Tom added them to his own slender pile. "The sum total is exactly 54 cents, he announced. "I'm going to blow in every bit on our breakfast and ferry tickets. That'll end us broke in the old town of Boston, where we're going to trust to luck to do the right thing by us." Tom was as good as his word, and the two boys filled in on ham and eggs and coffee, which made them feel several 100% better. Then, after a careful survey of the ferry slip and its approaches, lest their enemies be hiding in the background ready to pounce upon them for the purpose of yanking them back in disgrace to the farm, they dashed on board the boat, and in a little while they stepped ashore on the other side, feeling like birds, as Tom expressed it, in spite of the fact that they were flat broke and hadn't the least idea where their next meal and bed were coming from. "If I had a cent, I'd buy the paper and look up a job," said Tom cheerfully, as they started up the street from the ferry. "But as I haven't, I must wait an opportunity of some kind to get sight of some paper." The boys walked slowly along on the sunny side, occasionally gazing into the windows of the stores. In the course of an hour they drew near to the large retail dry goods district. Suddenly, just as they were turning an adjacent corner, a wild, agonized scream of a woman rang out on the morning air above the uproar of traffic. "Great Scott!" exclaimed Tom. "What's up now?" The boys, in common with a score of persons pressing up and down the walk, looked toward the curb. A frantic, handsomely dressed lady was standing a few feet out on the cobbles, her hands thrown helplessly aloft and shrieking, "My child! Oh, my heaven, my darling will be killed! Save her! Great Caesar! Look, Dick, look!" The sight that met their startled gaze was one well calculated to thrill them both. A humming electric car was bearing down upon a little girl in the act of dropping a coin into the slot in the center of the track. Quick as a flash, Garland sprang forward and tore the child from her perilous situation, and he didn't have the fraction of a moment to spare either, for the car as it shot by just grazed his left leg as he left the track. End of chapter 9.